And my guest today, Alexis Fishman, all the way from sunny Sydney, but not always there. More of that in a moment. Welcome. Hi, Alexis.
Thank you. Hi, Geoff. I'm so happy to be here. This is fun.
Oh, great to chat with you. I know we have to catch you. I mean, happily in Sydney right now, all things being considered. But I know it's hard not being able to flip back and forth as you usually do.
Yeah,
Alexis,
No, go ahead.
No,
go ahead. No, I was just going to say that I have been in New York for the last, really the last 12 years. And it's just in the last sort of 12 months that I've, tried to figure out how my husband and I can be here a little bit more often, for personal reasons, for work reasons, all sorts of things. And it seemed like a crazy idea sort of 12 months ago to see how we were going to be able to kind of have this bicontinental life, and now it feels like it's actually impossible. So I'm glad to be here, but it's a little stressful to think about sort of how and when international travel is going to return to normal. It doesn't, I can't imagine that'll happen in the short term, but so.
This too will pass, though, Alexis. This too will
Absolutely.
pass, and I'm sure you'll be able to head back to your second home in the Big Apple, where you've had a lot of work in recent years, and that's just fabulous. I want to ask you all about that, but let me take you right back to the beginning, because, as I said, a Sydney girl and a Mariah College girl too at that.
A proud Mariah graduate, yes. And actually, I will say that I do credit Mariah with so much of my performing arts education. I mean, I really just, under the wonderful guidance of Roberta Goot and Pauline Timms, there is still a music teacher there. There was just so much performing arts. I don't know what it's like now, but certainly when I was there, it was, there was the band and the vocal groups and the music festivals and drama festivals, performing arts nights and all sorts of things. So, I really got all of that from Mariah, which was
absolutely. Oh, look, I know Roberta from My Fiddler on the Roof a million years ago when she first put it on, and she's done it a few times since then. But an absolute dynamo, and the school, as you suspect, still incredible in terms of music, bands, orchestras, and touring the world, performing in classy venues too, New York included. So
well, that was when I first fell in love with New York. Actually, was with Roberta and the band on the very first international band tour.
Oh, wow.
I'm pretty sure that I think the venues have gotten a lot classier. Not to say we didn't play in some classy venues, but I think the venues have gotten a lot classier since we did it. But that was 1999, and that was when I fell in love with New York. That few days in New York that we spent, I said to myself, I have to live here. So my parents can blame Roberta for that.
Fine. Well, I think she'd happily accept any blame for that. But you must have done some shows then in Mariah time as well too, mustn't you? Did you get into the theatre side of things, not just the music side at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were doing, at one point there, it was drama festival as well as a music festival every year, but we did a lot of plays with the drama festival. I must have done 4 or 5 even, and directed. And I think is the Fiddler on the Roof that you're referring to from 1994?
No, my mom was even earlier. It was there was the International Youth Year one. So that was before she was even at Mariah. So that would have been 85 and 86.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So I did Fiddler in 1994 at Mariah. But no, it was a really like full. It was almost like a performing arts score. At least that's how it felt to me when I look back on it. Which of course, it's not, but it has such a fabulous performing arts life.
Yes.
Well, really amazing.
I popped back there again earlier, maybe last year, when they did Fiddler again for the anniversary. And this time I was working behind the scenes in my publicity role, but it was fabulous thing. And of course they had the different generations involved, and you would have still been in New York. So it was actually the year before last. Parents, grandparents of alumni and kids who'd been in the original performances back in the 90s, recreating their roles. Quite an extraordinary thing. They even set up the whole school as a kind of Anatevka, with animals and it was very, 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 very fun.
Fantastic.
I'm going to fast forward now. Let's get out of school and move forward to I think where you studied. Now you went off to Perth, so you're used to traveling. Tell us about that experience.
Oh gosh, I mean that was probably the greatest 3 years of my life. I mean, it was, I was 18 and I hopped on over to Perth, and for the first time was living away from, you know, not just out of home, but really far away from family and friends. And the way that, you know, the way that drama schools sort of are is that it's just, everyone just falls in love with each other within 5 minutes. Everyone's best friends, and it just turns into this kind of family. You know, so from a social sort of, you know, growing up perspective, it was amazing. But the education there, the ability to be able to spend from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, and often, you know, rehearsing and doing extra stuff on the weekends, was just something that I think that most, you know, young people at that time just sort of take for granted and don't realize how amazing it is. I would give anything to go back, because you're doing, you know, we had 4 dance classes a week, a private singing lesson a week, 2 voice classes, so not singing, but like voice, 2 acting classes, an improv class. We did clowning. We were doing productions in the afternoon, rehearsing productions. You know, it was just an incredible place. And those networks that you know, those friendships and those networks are still the networks that I hold today. And it's just, it was a fantastic, fun, wild, amazing experience. It was truly amazing.
Did the travel side of that contribute to it? I'm thinking that WAPA, and we're talking the West Australian Performing Arts Academy, was very much an away experience for most of the people there. That they wouldn't really have been a majority of locals from the from Western Australia, but it's like the college experience of getting away, and therefore probably made you even closer.
Absolutely, and in our year particularly, we had no people that were from Western Australia, which was unusual, because normally out of a class of 18, and we were really sort of very closely aligned. There was a musical theatre program, which was the program that I was in, and there was the acting program, and we were pretty close together. But usually there was, you know, at least sort of 2, 3, 4 people that would have been from Western Australia. And in our class, none of us were from WA, which I think even again contributed even more to that sense of sticking together and becoming a family and a community. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what people really, you know, at least when I was there, I think things have changed to some degree now. People really liked the fact that WAPA was far away, and that you can go and learn and study and not be exposed to sort of, you know, the industry prematurely, which I think people that go to NIDA sort of feel like they're constantly they're always on show, because anytime they're doing a production, there are industry people that are coming to watch already. Whereas we sort of went away for 3 years and then came back and showcased, you know, at the end of the 3 years, you do a showcase for agents and industry people. And it was like, look, here we are, you know, but yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it was, and Perth at that point as well was a very sort of student-friendly town, in that it was really affordable. So it was a great place to be a student. I think it's gotten a lot more expensive recently, but it was a wonderful experience, wonderful time,
and very highly regarded. I mean, these days, very much considered the place to go for musical theatre, especially.
Yeah,
you must have
absolutely.
come out of it with real credit, a real head start, I think, in making an industry splash.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, it's a funny thing to be in a program where it's highly, without, I don't want to imply that the group of students that I was with are still some of my best friends. This group, you know, we were incredibly close, but there's an innate competitiveness that comes with 18 people that are all sort of vying for the same thing. And, you know, so interestingly, I kind of came out of there feeling not as confident as I would have liked, partly because just from a personality perspective, I'm not one that kind of pushes myself to the front. And there were plenty of personalities, as you can imagine, in a group like that did do that very naturally and very easily. And I was sort of like, all right, well, if you want to be the best, then I'll sort of, you know, but then, you know, amazingly, I sort of ended up, you know, within a year, sort of having one of I would say the most enviable, you know, job opportunities, which was just a stroke of luck.
Now, are we talking about Dusty here?
Yeah, talking about Dusty.
Now, tell us more about that. We're talking about Dusty the musical, which was, you know, an extraordinary success. And toured. Tell us, you know, how you got the role and what the experience was like.
Oh, it's a great story. So, so as I said, so I graduated from WAPA, and you know, I was actually dating at the time someone in my year group who was a bit of the golden boy of the year, and he sort of got all these agent offers, and I kind of had a few less than him, and he kind of did some a new Australian musical that year, and I think had a slot on Home and Away, and was sort of doing really well, and I kind of kept getting knocked back. In fact, I even didn't get a call back for a production of Fiddler on the Roof, which, hello, was incredibly depressing. So I was sort of feeling a bit, it was sort of a tough year, and then the Dusty audition came along. And I went and auditioned. I think I actually auditioned for a role in the ensemble initially. I'm not exactly sure, but I remember auditioning for the part that, so I might just turn off my messages if I need to, if that's bothering people. And I auditioned for my role, and they didn't call me back because they were looking for a 16-year-old, sort of slightly overweight, nerdy redhead, which was not me. So, okay, no worries. And then a couple of weeks later, I got called back in again. And I really sort of at that point was very excited about it and keen about it, even though I knew I was kind of wrong looking. And anyway, I went through the audition process and became quite invested in it. And I remember it was actually Kol Nidre, and I went to synagogue. And I remember thinking it was 6 o'clock, and I'd been very anxious, and I'd been sort of desperately kind of, every time the phone rang, I'm thinking, is that my agent? Is that my agent? Because I knew I was kind of down to the last handful of girls, I think maybe 2 or 3 girls. And it was Kol Nidre, and it was 6 o'clock. And I thought, all right, no one's calling after 6, business hours, I can relax. And I went to synagogue, and I probably prayed really hard, and atoned really hard. And then I got back to my car, and the phone rang at about 9 o'clock, and it was my agent. And that was the night that he had called to tell me that I'd gotten the job. Wow. So it's weird because Yom Kippur has kind of always felt, well, yeah, exactly. Yom Kippur has always felt a little bit like, not obviously it's, very important day in the Jewish calendar, but it's become sort of an important day in the Alexis Fishman calendar too. And that was just, that role really was, for so many reasons, truly life-changing and just incredibly lucky. And I'm not sort of, trying to diminish my talent or anything like that, but it was just a lucky gig because it was a musical that did very, very well, and it was a long running, big show in Australia at the time. It was a new musical. People were really excited about it. The role itself was, so I played Dusty as a sort of a teenager, and it was a beautifully weaved in role, and it was really sort of the emotional kind of core of the piece, and so people responded well to the role. It just somehow kind of catapulted me into being a professional, and not just a professional, but being a principal, so being thought of as a principal artist, which was something that I would have been happy to have had a job in a professional show, sort of in the back of the chorus with no one ever knowing my name. But this really sort of just became a big hit, and I sort of became a big hit with it.
And a boost for your confidence, having been slightly, I'm not going to say introverted, but not feeling you were the front woman, out of WAPA.
Oh, it was a huge boost to the confidence, and again, sort of an interesting lesson in, I think I look back now, and I remember feeling as though, not getting work. I mean, Dusty, I think, auditioned. We started rehearsals in December. This was 2005. And the auditions were, Yom Kippur would have been September, October. So it was sort of, I had graduated from WAPA, let's say in November or December the previous year. So it had been a year of feeling as though I wasn't getting any work, and I hadn't cracked in yet. And all these people around me, including my boyfriend at the time, were getting these, what I thought were big gigs. And then suddenly I sort of got this one that was sort of bigger and better than so many others. And I look back now, and it feels as though that was so quick and easy, although at the time it felt like it was such a long process. It was just, it was amazing. It really was a huge stroke of luck.
I love the fact that it was a child role, because there's an interesting little bit of synergy about that with a couple of things that come up in your career so far. I'm gonna push forward to something that I worked on one stage in the and the PR side of things, which was a very fun role of Little Sally in a production of Urinetown, the musical, which, as we know, has a name that could kill a show pretty good.
Yeah,
fun
Urinetown,
playing a naughty young lady that basically, you know, calls it as she sees it.
Yeah, that was great fun. That was before Dusty. That was that
was it
year.
Really? Okay.
That was that year. After graduating, I believe it was June. It was the middle of the year, I think.
That's
or something
right. It was
like
at the
that, June or July.
Bondi Pavilion.
So that was in that year. The very the kind of crappy Bondi Pavilion Theatre, which I don't know whether that's been redone. I think it's maybe had a renovation and it's a lot
little
nicer
bit,
now.
but not a lot. It's been cleaned up. It doesn't leak anymore.
A little bit. Okay, that's good. Yeah, yeah, and that was heaps of fun as well. Directed by the wonderful Stephen Brandon, who is still a very good friend of mine. He's in LA, and yeah, that was great fun. And yeah, I tended to have this kind of you know, knack for getting cast as littles and youngs, which is nice.
Long may it continue. I mean, my lips are sealed, but you know, these sort of things can happen. Of course, I've seen you in some, you know, some very hard drama roles, some quite tough character roles. Playing the lead in Closer, which was pretty amazing piece.
That was also a Stephen and Josh Brandon production. That was after Dusty. In fact, it was right after Dusty, I believe.
Must have been, yeah.
Patrick Marber's play, which was made into a pretty successful film with Natalie Portman and
yes,
Jude Law. Is it Jude Law?
Yep.
Jude Law. And Clive Owen. And yeah, that was great. And I think that was, you know, doing that right off the back of Dusty, to go from sort of what was a kind of flashy, you know, very much a musical theatre, you know, role. It was really cool to be able to sort of sink my teeth into some drama, both from a personal, you know, artistic, creative perspective, but also because I really wanted to kind of let people know that I could act, which musical theatre people often get, you know, told that they can't, which is of course stupid. But it was great. It was really good fun, and that was at Newtown Theatre.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great play. It's a great play.
I'm going to throw two more shows at you, and you can tell us about them. Certainly saw you in both as well. One was Shout, and Kiss of the Spider Woman. Oh my goodness. The Haze.
Yeah, so the Haze, which was not at the Haze now, but Kiss of the Spider Woman, then it was Darlinghurst Theatre, which has now moved down the road. And Kiss of the Spider Woman was, I mean, that was probably one of the scariest roles for me, because it was made famous by Chita Rivera. Caroline O'Connor actually just did an Australian production, and in Melbourne end of last year. That was obviously much after ours, but that role is always sort of thought of as a dancer role, also a real femme fatale, which is not how I would naturally cast myself. I can dance, but I wouldn't say that I was a dancer. But that was probably the most fun part of it, was actually being able to dance, which I hadn't really had a chance to do. Plus, we did a very, very pared down version, so that show's usually done with a large chorus and a big cast.
And a small theatre as well too.
And it's a very small theatre. Our production, I think, was 7 or 8. We all played multiple roles. And it's a brilliant piece for those who aren't familiar with it. Candace and Ebb's Kiss of the Spider Woman. I'm sure you can find videos, at least clips, if not the full thing, online somewhere, based on a book and made into a great film with Raul Julia, I think.
Raul Julia, absolutely, yeah.
And it's a fabulous story, and it makes a brilliant musical. But those things, you know, doing those kind of small shows, and there's a lot more of them now, thankfully, because of the Haze. You know, it wasn't that common to have that opportunity to see those shows that wouldn't necessarily get big commercial productions. You know, that was one of those shows that wasn't ever going to kind of be a big show, although it was done at Melbourne Theatre Company last year.
We had a mutual friend who was in that with you, and it's James Lee. And James Lee's got a fun story which kind of connects with our community as well too, in that I know when Top Hole came out to Australia and toured with, you know, a huge number of shows, as he has done, of Fiddler, all around Australia, James was actually in the cast in a smaller role, in a principal role, but was understudy to Tevye and followed Topol all around Australia for goodness knows how many performances, and didn't get a single run on stage that whole time. But people were coming to see Topol. But, you know, a fun thing to work with, you know, iconic name like that. Anyway, side story.
Definitely, yeah.
Let's follow you now, I think, to New York, because so much of what has happened since then has been not just shows where you've been cast, and you've been cast in a lot of things, but some of these self-devised cabaret shows where you've particularly been, you know, it's been you or a character. Take us through how that happened and the chronology of all of that, because that involves a lot of really interesting and colourful theatres and roles.
Yeah, look, the cabaret thing and the solo sort of self-devised stuff is interesting. I mean, I could obviously talk about New York for hours and hours and hours, which I know we don't have. It's a very exciting place. Of course, there's so much opportunity. There's so much opportunity for an artist to feel like an artist, because you can, you know, just spend your whole day and your whole week being involved and invested in artistic you know, opportunities and creativity and things like that. So, you know, everything that you see when you visit or when you're watching movies or anything like that is true about the Broadway community and just the artistic community there. It's buzzy and amazing. It's also really, really hard, which, you know, I won't come to it as a surprise to anyone, but it's a tough city and it's a tough industry to sort of get into. And I've done a lot of off-Broadway shows, a lot of new workshops of new works, which was really exciting. But it came to a point where I started to feel like, you know, doing cabaret and doing my own work became really, really satisfying, because I was no longer having to go in front of a panel of people to audition and try and be what they wanted me to be. And it's a difficult thing, you know. Auditioning is on one hand you're supposed to sort of just go in and be yourself and just be free and perform, you know, but auditions are really hard, and and because you do so many of them there, it can become very difficult to sort of keep positive and keep true to that, to your performing, well, to kind
trust
of truth,
yourself,
you know?
to trust yourself when you're also second guessing what is it they want, what do you want me to be, all of that
exactly.
going on, and the rejection that every actor has to cope with too.
Absolutely, Geoff, that's true. The trust is exactly the word that I was looking for. It does become very hard and just soul destroying in a way, because you can't really just go in there and perform. I mean, the best audition is when you go in and you're just able to be yourself and you don't worry about anything. But as you say, that becomes challenging when you're really looking for jobs and you're trying to get roles. So cabaret became a way for me to throw all that out the window and be able to do what it was that I wanted to do, to get on stage and know that I wasn't needing to fit into anybody's box of what they thought I should be or needed to be. I just got to perform in front of my audience and do what I know I do well, which is entertain and, you know, and perform. So I've actually, I just did my 5th solo show this past year. And they have been very diverse. The first one is Club Galveston, which actually debuted in Australia at the Adelaide Cabaret Festival in 2011. We followed that with the stint at the Melbourne Cabaret Festival and then at the Seymour Centre in Sydney, all back then. And it made its US debut in 2014 at the New York Music Theatre Festival. And I was nominated. Yes, thank you. Was nominated for outstanding individual performance. Won that award, which was a big coup, because there's a lot of actors in that festival, and that was really, really gratifying and very cool, because that was a show that I had initially written with James Miller, with the wonderful James Miller. He's a very prolific writer and performer himself, and then I sort of, you know, took it kind of on my own and developed it even further for New York. That was hugely gratifying, and actually that piece, which is set in Berlin in 1933 and tells the story of a Jewish cabaret star that's performing her final night on stage as the Nazis come to power. It's had an amazing life. I mean, it's going to be 10 years old next year. It's been done here in Australia, I actually did it a few years ago at Mariah and Emmanuel, as with educational workshops that went with it about responsible citizenship and, you know, standing up for what's right. We've done a number of community centers and synagogues in the US, across the US, in Ohio, in upstate New York, in New Jersey. And I'd like to actually bring it back for a return season in Australia, because Australia hasn't seen it in its full-blown New York production. And I'm also writing a television pilot based on that too. So that's kind of had its own.
We would love to see it back. There is a wide audience who will love this and identify with this. I'm gonna put to you again something that we just touched on earlier, but the trusting yourself, or actually being personal, if you like. This is a story that's got a personal feeling for you, a personal connection, and I think that might be part of why you love to do your own work, because you, as you said, can be yourself, but also can express deep connections with your Judaism. Was that part of the motivation in Club Gilbertson?
Yeah, look, it's a world that I've been really interested in probably since I saw the film Cabaret when I was a teenager, which, you know, I'm sure everyone knows and loves. So the world itself was fascinating to me, but the impetus for the story really came out of a desire to try and bring myself a little bit closer in some way to my grandparents' experience. I'm the grandchild of 4 survivors, none of whom were connected in any way to Germany, you know, from the heritage standpoint. But I sort of had this sense growing up, and maybe it was a way to distance myself, because to actually, you know, as a teenager, to try and understand the Holocaust, it's incredibly difficult and painful. But I sort of had this image of, you know, the victims of the Holocaust being shtetl-dwelling, uneducated, unassimilated, very religious Jews that had their headscarves and sort of toddled off, you know, off to their deaths. And as I grew older, I realized that wasn't the case at all, that it didn't matter who you were as a Jew. If you were Jewish across Europe, you were obviously a victim. And I wasn't aware of places like, you know, the German Jewish community, which were highly assimilated and also incredibly important and effective in the arts world and in the arts community. You know, so this piece was actually just trying to sort of put myself in the shoes. You know, who might I have been if I had been living in Europe in 1933? I might have been this cabaret star that that's a fictional character that I created, and would have met the same fate as, you know, so many others. So yeah, I mean, look, it's definitely a long-standing interest and deep connection to what happened to my family and our people. This was sort of just being able to look at it from a slightly different perspective that I think I certainly wasn't exposed to, you know, as a Jewish teenager learning about the Holocaust in school or in any conversation with my family.
We've just commemorated Yom HaShoah very recently, and I know that that you're very connected and very engaged with commemoration wherever you are, and certainly in Sydney at the moment. And I've seen some of what you've posted for us to take in and to, I won't say enjoy, but to be moved by. Let's move to something a little lighter with the Jewish connection again. I saw this as well too, which was, in fact, I think I might have got to MC this at Sheer Madness Jewish Music Festival. But the Boy Chicks from Broadway. What a fun idea! Tell us about that.
Boy Chicks of Broadway. It's so fun. Boy Chicks of Broadway tells the story of Jewish Broadway composers. We start with, we actually open with White Christmas, which is not the song you would expect to hear at a show called Boy Chicks of Broadway, but in fact written by Irving Berlin, who was Jewish. And so that's where we start, and we look at Irving Berlin and George Gershwin and Ira Gershwin, and we go through all the way from there through Stephen Sondheim and Stephen Schwartz and many other people, all the way to modern day Jewish Broadway composers. I mean, the joke about creating that show is that I didn't have to look, you know, for the Jewish composers. I just had to choose whatever music I wanted to sing, and 99% of the time those songs were composed by Jews. There's very few non-Jewish Broadway composers, certainly before the 80s and 90s, definitely, but even now, a lot of the sort of even the up and coming modern Broadway composers are Jewish too. So that's a lot of fun. Definitely different and much less stressful in a way for me to perform than Club Gelb, because Club Gelb really needs to be, you know, aside from the subject matter, it's also, you know, there's a script that I very closely follow with that, whereas Boy Chicks is far more
the conversation with the audience, isn't it? I mean, that's what's fun about something. I see you in cabaret, and being yourself, as you say, and sharing this music with an audience is part of the fun. I think they feel very with you, as you say. It's probably a relaxing experience. Another Jewish inspired show, though, a little bit of an icon, Amy Winehouse. Tell us more about that.
Oh gosh, I've always been a huge Amy Winehouse fan. I've also been told for quite a number of years that we look the same in some ways, which, you know, we're just Jewish girls of a certain ilk, so we, you know, yeah, of course we look the same. So I've always been a fan, and thankfully for Sheer Madness, actually, the Jewish Music Festival, I feel sort of that whenever that's happening, I kind of throw an idea out there, and they usually say yes, sure, which is wonderful. So Amy was an idea that I'd had that I pitched to Sheer Madness, and I was planning originally to just, you know, put together a show of her music, and me as Alexis sort of tell you about the songs and talk about, you know, why I like this song or why I like that song. And actually my husband said to me, "You're crazy, you've got to play her." And I remember saying to him, "Are you mad? Are you out of your brain? There's no way I can play Amy Winehouse." I mean, for those of you who aren't sort of familiar with Amy Winehouse, she's a powerhouse artist, unfortunately passed away from alcohol abuse in 2011. At the age of 27, but a phenomenal artist that is just in a different stratosphere. So I said to my husband, "No way, I can't do that." And he convinced me to, which was, I'm very grateful to him for convincing me to do that. So we put together a show about her, really, meaning it's sort of from her perspective. It's her speaking to the audience about her life. And the premise is actually that she's heard that Tony Bennett wants to record a full album with her, and her last recording before she passed away was a single with Tony Bennett. It's beautiful, Body and Soul, for those of you who want to look it up. It's just gorgeous. But they'd sort of talked about recording a full album, and of course she passed away before that was possible. So the premise of the show is that she's come back to Earth because Tony always said he wanted to record an album with her, but Tony just won't die. She keeps waiting for him and he never shows up. So she's decided to come back to Earth to get Tony herself. So, but also the thing about that is, the thing about Amy for me is I was always, you know, she had serious drug and alcohol problems and was for years and years splashed all over the news in a very sort of disrespectful, particularly with the British
the tabloids were very cruel.
Exactly. The tabloids were just awful, and there was a lot of blame thrown around about her death. It was, you know, it was because of her father, or because of her parents' divorce, or because of her abusive boyfriend, or whatever it was. And I sort of had this you know, I, as much as I can, as someone that never met her, I had this deep desire to sort of redeem her, and to remind people that she was more than just a tabloid news item, that I just think people forget that people are real. And so I really came from a place of wanting to try and in some way defend her, and, you know, put her on stage with respect, and also pay tribute to her amazing music.
It's a kind of a mitzvah, Alexis. It's a kind of a mitzvah. You know, it is.
Thank you. Thanks, Geoff. I mean, look, I don't know. I have also an idea for a Monica Lewinsky show. I seem to want to redeem people. So, I don't know, that's something. But the coolest part of the whole Amy Winehouse show experience is that we actually, a couple of years ago now, I guess, in New York, managed to meet Mitch Winehouse, who is Amy's father. And he is a true mensch. He's just a warm, loving, wonderful, wonderful man that has worked tirelessly since she's died with the Amy Winehouse Foundation, which her parents set up after she passed away, which raises money for drug and alcohol counselling, and they do really amazing work based out of the UK. And so I struck up a relationship with Mitch, and was lucky enough to actually have him perform with me. We did a double bill. I did the show in the second half, and he performed in the first half. He's a jazz singer, a brilliant jazz singer. But I happen to have right here. Please do. Yes. I happen to have, this is a signed poster from Mitch. This is the poster for our show, as you can see, Mitch Winehouse and Alexis Fishman. We were raising money for the foundation. But here it says he signed it for me. It's a picture of him and Amy. That's a picture of me, of course. But he signed it, lots of love, Mitch and Amy. So that's a treasured possession. But he's really just a beautiful man. And I you know, I've never been more terrified. I was sound checking, and he'd never seen the show. I mean, we had met and we had struck up a friendship, and he agreed to come and perform with me, but he'd never seen the show. He didn't know what I was going to do or say. And of course I was of course incredibly respectful, but also, you know, there's jokes in there about her, you know, she teases herself in the show that I wrote about her drug and alcohol abuse and whatever. And I was sound checking on the day of the show, and in walked Mitch in a part of the show that's quite heavy on the sort of on really her going deeply into her issues and her problems. Oh my God, that was the most terrifying thing. I think my heart sank when I was like, oh my God, it's Mitch Winehouse and I'm pretending to be his daughter and talking about all her drug and alcohol problems. Anyway, it all worked out very well. He's a lovely, lovely man. And actually we were lucky enough to go visit him in London this past July. And we went to have dinner at his place, and he's got all of Amy's awards in a cabinet and photos of her, of course, all over the place. And it was quite surreal and really, I mean, it was a very cool experience.
Well, Alexis, this story has taken us from Queen's Park, possibly Bellevue Hills, certainly all over the eastern suburbs of Sydney, through to New York and beyond, through many characters, some mythical, many of them historical, all with lots of love. It's been beautiful talking with you. Last question for you is, what on the other side of this? You know, it's difficult, but it's not the end of the world, as we were saying earlier, compared to what our parents and grandparents went through. What's next for you, Alexis? On the other side of this,
gosh.
Even if it was a wish, even if it was a kind of a magic, magic carpet that could take you to the next big thing.
Well, you know, I have been cast in a show that I'm not yet able to talk about, which is probably not going to happen at the time that it's supposed to, but hopefully that will. I am doing a lot of writing, and actually I'm also doing some cabaret coaching. So I've since realized that, you know, I realized now that I did my fifth cabaret show, my fifth sort of solo show, that I have a little knack for it, and I'm actually doing some coaching, which is really nice. So that's, you know, for artists that might be terrified of writing a cabaret and putting themselves out there like that. So I'm enjoying some of that, which is nice at the moment. And that's been good fun, and that's available to anyone. Oh, look, I don't know. I just want to be back on stage. That's really where I live and where I'm myself, and just my sort of realist identity is when I'm performing. You know, and as fun as it has been to be self-producing and creating my own material, it's also lovely to just be the performer and be paid to perform and not have to worry about how many tickets you've sold or, you know, all of that stuff. So I'm just hoping to get back on stage. And I also just hope that when all this is through, that people aren't scared to go to the theatre, and that we can get our industry back on track, because it's really been so hard hit, and it's just devastating. It
has. I don't think people realise, the general populace won't realise just that it takes, you know, time and preparation, that things won't, you know, suddenly happen overnight, but they will happen. We will be out of this on the other side. And I'm very sure that we'll have a voracious audience looking, you know, to live entertainment and to hear artists like yourself, whether they are singing from the heart, something personal, or whether they are, you know, creating a role that's big and brassy. We shall wait and see with bated breath, Alexis. But in the meantime, absolute joy to chat with you today.
Thank you, Geoff.
Lovely
Thank you. It was really fun.
Dave, take care.
You
Spirits
too.
up. All those sort of things.
Of course.
And
yes, be well.
Bye-bye.